Okay, so everybody see it well on the screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I guess you should change the light a little because the model is in the shade. Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
there we go. Thank you.
Okay, so for the workshop I prefer some sketching. It's just a simple model that I did for my non-metal workshop. Something that possible to paint on the beginner level, and the main task is just to divide this model on the simplest geometrical form. As I said, this looks complex, but you always can divide it on something simple. For example, the helmet, the top of the helmet, it's the orb. Finally, it's the orb. This kind of the rear part of the helmet, it's something like the cone. So just two segments of the cone, attach it to the orb. This side of the helmet, it's the cylinder. Top part of the visor, it's also two pieces of cylinder, a bit deformed, and this one, it's several segments of the orbs, just cut it apart and combine it together. But technically, these ribs, these crests, it's just part of the orb. The same about the neck guard. So the neck guard is just a part of the flat surface, maybe a bit curved, reminds the cylinder. So this part is also part of the cylinder. Upper part covered by the neck guard, but the upper part of the breastplate is just an orb. So the same about these pauldrons. This one, it's just a part of the orb. This rosette combined from the small segments from the sectors of the cone. So technically, if you for yourself divide all these elements, divide all this part of the armor on smallest elements, you can figure out, you can recognize all the simplest form. And if you remember that I show on the presentation how possible to show all these 3D surfaces, all these 3D shapes on the flat surface, you can paint the same over the model. So just think about your model, not like about something complex, but think about simplest elements combined together. For you, it will be much easier. So also another trait about the non-metal. So do you see, if I will rotate the model, it looking good from almost all angles. But anyway, I try to find several angles that will be preferable, that will be the primer view for my model. And from this point of view, my model looks the best. Maybe it's looking good, maybe it's looking very good from the front. If I turn it, it's looking not so good on the 35 degree, and already have some contradictions, but I try to hide it. I try to show several main views like this one, frontal view, side view, back view, and another side view, like the most spectacular. If I turn it on the 35 degree, so it's still looking good, maybe have not so much of interesting elements, but anyway, it's still looking good. And for show this very well, you just need to know some traits. So the first trait, think about the model, not like about the something complex. Think about the model like about the simple brick, like about the simple prism like this one. So like one view, you see one view, second view, the third view, fourth view, five view, but anyway, all these views will be something like the picture of your model. By the way, you receive the best possible result because you know how to paint something shiny on the flat surface, and just think about several interesting views. One, second, third, fourth. Anyway, it's a flat view, and on all this flat view you will see your model. But you will see your model so good as possible.
Sorry, one question.
Yes?
Do you consider the light from the zenital light, or
So
in this case?
it's also depend on your setup. For example, about the setup. As I show on the last picture, you just need to figure out what you may see around the model. But sometimes, if your idea was to show something like the shiny sun, your sun you may see only from the one point of view, from here. And it's mean that the rest of the model will have no sun. And your idea already doesn't looking well on the rest of the view. But if you can imagine something not like the sun, but something like the white cloudy sky, it always will looks bright, white, and compare with the rest of environment. For example, imagine the white sky and the black line of the horizon. Doesn't matter what is it. It may be something like the forest, or it may be something like the battlefield, or the, I don't know, the skyline of the city. Anyway, you may see something like the dark skyline and white, big white spot over it. Anyway, your contrast will work very well with the white sky and the black horizon. It's like the typical painting of the sky, earth, non-metal. Like, do you know how the typical way how you can paint the chrome? The chrome, the white, blue sky, blue-white sky, something shiny, and the black line of the horizon and the brown earth. So this is the simplest way how you can show the chrome. So technically, this is the same. It's how you can show the chrome, but it will be not the shiny chrome. It's something like the dark chrome, something like the semi-gloss chrome. Anyway, most important, it's contrast. Do you see here? You may see a lot of white, and you will see a lot of dark colors too. So contrast important. Where is it? Yes, and as I said, not so important. Is it zenithal light? Maybe it's a light from the side. Anyway, think about your metal like about the mirror that can reflect everything from around. For example, as I said, this looking good from the whole point of view because I have a lot of light. So it means I have the ambient light. Maybe it's zenithal light visible through the cloudy sky, through the layer of the white clouds. Anyway, it's something bright. It's ambient, but most important to show the contrast. So most important to show the contrast between the black and white. So we have the white from above everywhere. So it's working well because it's white. The contradictions with the sun, as I said, it's something that looks really shiny, and sometimes it spoils the rest of the figure. For example, you see something like the really strong light from the sun visible on the top of the helmet, and it means it's so bright. It will be a bit blurred with the scratches, and it's blur a lot of reflections. If you imagine the how it's called overlighted photography, you see only a white spot, The rest is just disappear because light is too strong. So when you will paint the non-metal metal, you can correct it and you can paint it better. But technically, sometimes you may see too much of light, and it means that you will see a lot of white spot on the top and nothing more. And it means that just nothing to see, only white spot. It's not interesting. So the same about the pure white clothes, for example. For example, you may see just good white clothes, but also it's not so good. I suggest you to imagine something that also make a little of the darker spots. It may be something like the rainy gray clothes, something like the really dark clothes before the thunder, or during the thunder. Anyway, you receive something like the variation. Not the pure white everywhere, but something like the combination of the light gray and dark gray. Anyway, this is something that I show on the top part of the helmet. I don't know what is it. Maybe it's rainy clouds. Maybe it's trees. Something dark that I can show over the top part of the helmet too. The same you may see on the pauldrons. Also, something like the white reflections here, but also several dark spots here. So you just need to imagine your environment from around. You just need to imagine where standing your warrior. And if you remember the last picture, the girl who's standing in the forest, just try to imagine something around the figure. Make the setup in your mind. It may be something, for example, like several trees standing around your model. And you just try to imagine how these trees will be reflected onto the surface of your model. But also, here have another trick. You paint something, and you paint something over surface. your primary is the model. Your primary task is the model. Something like the environment, it's important, but environment, it's the secondary. It's something that's possible to show good, but always think about your model. Always think about the interesting view over surface of your model. For example, you can imagine like the lamp that drop the light from this point, so this looking good. You can imagine something like the dark elements around, so that's okay. But probably it's okay only from the one point of view. If you turn it, you have no light, you have no interesting element, nothing to see. So that bend your environment. Bend in your mind your environment by this manner for see something good. Okay, looking good. Turning, again, nothing to see. Again, bend your environment. So always bend something in your mind. Think about the model, how to show something good over surface. Maybe it will be not very physically correct, but anyway, think about interesting view over surface. This is a second trait. And the third trait. How to explain it better? Sorry, just need to think about the right words. Okay, so about the environment, as I said, primary it's to show the good spots that might be visible over surface. But also I need to know about the figure. So when you paint it, don't think about something that you rotate in your hands. Because, for example, you have the shiny surface. For example, this one, the shiny surface. You have room, and you rotating your model, and what you see, you always see the same. You always see the same reflection here. But when you paint it, it's physically impossible. You cannot have the same reflections on the whole surface. Think about not like about the models that you can rotate. Think about something that's standing and you self walking around. It's like the panorama glued around of the model. So it's like a glued picture around the model. By the way, maybe it will be also physically not very correct because you cannot break the physical rule because you paint something totally matte. As I said, the totally matte surface cannot reflect the light, and that means that it have no natural reflections that will be transformed by the natural way. But anyway, you can make the illusion. And when you try to imagine how observer walking around, you can observe, you can imagine something on the front, on the side, of the back side of the model. And anyway, when you go around, you always will see something interesting, some kind of the typical outlines, typical reflections for this tree, for example, or for this tree house. Anyway, it's something that you may see from the different point of view. And for us also important to find these special outlines. I think it will be better if I just paint firstly something on the paper, especially for show you the interesting outlines. You may see a lot of reflection in the real life, and sometimes you just need to catch the sense and figure out how outlines of this reflection. For example, you have just regular forks. Just a fork, it has the curved surface, and you may see how reflection might be distorted. For example, from one point of view, do you see the line? No? Now?
You color with your hand.
Ah, sorry, yeah. Now this is a line. Okay, so interesting the bending, how it will be changed depend on the angle. From one point of view, you see one line. When you rotate it a little, you receive more curved line, for example. Like this one. Do you see? From another point of view, this line might be bended even more. and from another point of view, you receive something like this one. This is something typical that you can find in the real life. Every time when you think about non-metal, you need to figure out that you make an illusion of reflection. And reflection you always can find in the real life. Because as I said, something from the real life, it's always most complex. For example, you can imagine the perfect orb on the TV screen. But if you find the perfect orb painted in chrome, you receive something more detailed, a lot of smallest elements of the surface of this chrome orb, and you just need to make something like the small screenshots from surface of this orb, something like the small sticker, and put it to the orb over your model. It's just catching of the small details and grab it and put it to the model. So when you know where must be the brightest spots, for example, you can make the spots better if you just take some small elements like this one or like this one and put it to the surface of your model. So anyway, it looks like collage. As I said, if you want to paint something complex, go from the main, go from the simple volume. You imagine your model, you imagine your setup. It's something abstract, it's something ambient. Then go with more focused and focused. Try to figure out, okay, I have this environment, how I need to paint my model to this environment for understand where the brightest spots, for example, how I need to rotate it. So then you make your imagination more complex. This is my main view, my secondary view, my third view. Anyway, it's already more approximated, interesting picture. Then you go forward. Then you need to show something like the small details. Try to find these small elements like this one, like these lines, and put to your model. When you combine it together, you already will know, is it looking good or not? So check this model. Is it looking good or not from the distance? Because now it's too rough. I just paint something like the main spots. It's just a sketching. When I rotate it, you see it's turned and it already doesn't look like metal because you see it's not natural because everything is fixed on surface. But when you see only a stable picture, it's already better because it looks like shiny because it's contrasting. Maybe it's not perfect because it's not blended. But anyway, it's looking like something shiny from the distance. And when you make it something like this one, like sketching, so make it more focused. It's something like just a realization of the environment from around. So then go deep inside of details and make it more soft. So I try to blend something and make the good condition of the blending, for example, especially for show how it may look in the final. As I said, most important, most difficult is to paint the helmet, because helmet you may see from the different angles. But something like the pauldron you may see only from something like the 45 degree. You cannot see the pauldron from this point of view. It's just disappear. This pauldron you cannot see it. But here you can see it very well. So this one it's simple to paint. But the helmet you may see from the 360 degree, and it's most difficult. So as I try to imagine how to show the helmet, it's like orb. So I paint the line of the horizon. Do you see? The line of the horizon, something like the bright and dark spots, nothing more, but it already looks like orb. So, and then I try to blend it a little. So I need the black and white, I guess. I have not pure black, but I can mix it with the brown and blue. So for the non-metal painting and for the texture painting, I just suggest you to use only matte paints. Why? That because I explained in begin, because I must cover all the natural reflections. If I will have the natural reflection over the satin surface, over the glossy surface, it will be combined with my painted reflection. In result, I receive a lot of contradictions. My painted structure will be just broken. My structure will be covered under the natural reflections, and especially for avoid it, I suggest to use only totally matte paints. I recommend something like the Scale 75, for example. Reaper miniatures, also good colors. AK, good enough. Andrea, Josonia, and Chimera. Nocturna also makes a new range, and they're also looking good. So mostly it must be totally matte. Okay, so is it visible? So firstly, I need to paint good color. And as I said, helmet, it's a combination. Orb on the top part and cylinder on the bottom part. How I can show something interesting on the cylinder? It will be just the lines in direction of the axis, in this direction. And it means that I can paint something like interesting blurred ambient lines here in this direction of the helmet. So I especially don't touch the upper part of the helmet, especially for avoid the contradictions. Because when I will rotate the helmet, I always will have something ambient on the top part, and my lower part always will be like the cylinder. If I paint something like the interesting reflections, like I just spoil my works, just paint something that's possible to see good from the one point of view on the orb. For example, like this kind of round reflection. You see? So it's looking good for the orb from this point of view. But when I rotate it, it's already distorted wrongly. It's not like reflection on the orb. It's reflection of the something different, but not the orb. It already doesn't work well for not metal. And this is why I not use this kind of very well usable, very well visible elements on the top of the helmet. I try to hide everything from the top because it's most difficult part, because I must to see the good, less contradictory reflection from any point of view. And this is why on the top I suggest to paint something ambient. But on the other side, if I paint something like this one, like lines visible over the cylinder, I rotate it from many angles. I see just the ambient lines, and I know it's a cylinder. So nothing wrong. That's okay. I can keep these elements here on the helmet. And as I said, the contrast is strong. I have the white spots and I have the dark spots, so it's working very well because contrast is strong. So now, how to blend these elements together? Because now it's just a sketching. It's maybe looking good from the distance, but when you take it in hand, so it's already not so good. Have many ways how you can blend it. And as I show on the previous picture, sometimes have the visible traces of polishing over surface of the metal. And you can show it like the simple, just a simple small stripes. So I mix a good color and show what I mean. So tell me if it will be not in focus, because I just cannot see it very well from my angle. So I have the dark color and the brighter color here. I need to mix something like the medium color, and I can blend it together by these lines. I just need to imagine how this element was polished. I think something like the milling machine can polish it by this way. I think it's not very typical for the Middle Ages, but now I just see a lot of these elements on the reenactors. So just possible to paint something like the traces of the milling machine. I try to imagine that it was polished by the radius, and I can paint something like tiny stripes. So is it visible? So now it's still not perfect, it's just the first intermediary colors. So the darker color to make this gradient smoother. So depend on the size of your gradient, something like the big spots on the helmets, I think you need maybe 7 or 8 colors. So do you know, if you have a lot of colors in the gradient looks smoother. If you have just 3 colors in the gradient, it's good for the small surface, but the bigger surface, it's already not so good. So, and I just paint several steps in the gradients, one over another. Maybe it's not best position for me, because when I painted by myself at home, I just finding the good pose for me. I must be very stable. So firstly, when I sitting at home, I fix my arms in 2 points. I put the elbows on the table and the wrists to something like the box of this height, especially for fix my arms very well. This way I have really good stable position. And I also need to know the height of your table, because most important is to keep your backbone in good condition. If you're very bended every time, you cannot work well. You're always very tired because you're sitting very uncomfortable. It's just impossible to sit this and this pose very long. So need to find the good pose for you. I just know that many hobbyists use something like the kitchen or something random places for paint the model, so it's very unhealthy. You cannot sit well, you just damaging your backbone, because it's just unhealthy. You jam some capillaries, you turn your backbone, so it just finds a good pose for you. Something that will be comfortable for you. You don't need to bend your backbone. You need to upper table, you need something like the soft chair, good height for your elbows, for your wrists. This way you can sit longer and you will not so tired, and you can do the better quality of work, because you will not think about your uncomfortable position. So another important thing is the light. It's the light because I know many people in random places use small LED light. LED light, it's good if you have no place, but it's not bad. It's very bad for the high quality painting, because have just not enough of light. You cannot see small details. You cannot see your flares. When you painted something outside of the light spot, so it's looking good, but when you go under the light, it's already looks terrible, because just have no light for reveal all this kind of flares. So this way, you just need to find the good position for you.
Excuse me, is it yours or it was with the laptop? This,
Yeah, you can check it. Okay, so now I'm painting several layers, one over another. Here needs some practice, because it's not easy to paint really tiny lines, make it very delicate. Because, as I said, you can imagine the size of the traces. In the real size, it may be something like the half of the millimeter. And in this scale, so divided on the 10 parts, so it must be like the 100 part of the millimeters. It's too much. But anyway, if you can do it very soft, you can hide this incorrection, you can hide this sense, and you receive something like the view of the polished surface visible from the distance. Probably it's, as I said, it's not 100% physically correct, but you receive something like the sense, something like the view. And the meaning of the painting, as I said, it's not the repeating all elements in the size of the scale. The meaning is to make an illusion. And an illusion, it's something like the view. For making the view, you just need to figure out how the rules lay in the base of the view, and you receive the same view on the flat surface or onto the model. So now I'm doing something like the tiny lines. A bit too much of water. So for this blending, consistency of my paint must be not very diluted, because with diluted paint I cannot paint tiny lines. So it's opaque. It have not a lot of water, because if I will have a lot of water, my paint will be just spread around because it's too liquid. So another color, just a little more bright. And for this kind of blending, important to have really precise brushes, really tiny and sharp. Mostly important to have the sharp tip, because the sharp tip is your working place. So technically, I'm working only with the 5 part of the length of the fur.